Tom Hanks, the name that resonates like a warm embrace across generations. The man who didn't just act in films, but carved himself into the very soul of American cinema. With his everyman charm and unshakable authenticity, he became more than a movie star. He became the conscience of Hollywood, the voice that could make us laugh through tears and believe in humanity's goodness, even in our darkest hours. From the moment he made us weep for a volleyball named Wilson in Castaway, to when he showed us that life was indeed like a box of chocolates in Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks didn't just perform roles, he seared them into our collective memory with such profound truth that we forgot we were watching an actor at all. He ignited the screen in Philadelphia, becoming the first major Hollywood star to humanize the AIDS crisis, winning his first of back-to-back Oscars and forever changing how America saw both disease and courage. Over 100 films, $9.7 billion in worldwide box office receipts, 6 Emmy Awards, 2 consecutive Academy Awards. The numbers only hint at a legacy that transcends mere statistics. But behind the warm smile that lit up countless red carpets, behind the approachable demeanor that made him America's dad, lived a man silently wrestling with invisible demons that would have broken someone with less resilience. Few ever saw the boy who grew up in chaos, shuffling between broken homes like a ghost. The young man whose body began betraying him just as his star began to rise. The father watching his wife battle cancer while he smiled for cameras. The icon discovering his own blood had turned against him, forcing him into a war with his own mortality that continues to this day. Behind those kind eyes that charm millions lay nights of silent suffering, medical fears that never made headlines, and wounds that even the warmth of public adoration could never fully heal. What transformed the most beloved actor in America into a man fighting battles the world never knew existed? How did the figure who epitomized strength and reliability on screen spend decades hiding tremors, injections, and the exhausting reality of chronic illness from an adoring public? What you're about to witness is not a tale of Hollywood glory. It's a raw, haunting journey through pain, perseverance, and the price of being everyone's hero while privately struggling to hold yourself together. This is the story of how Tom Hanks smiled through agony, loved through loss, and somehow kept believing in tomorrow, even when his own body declared war on today. If Tom Hanks ever touched your heart, if his performances ever made you believe in something greater, leave a like below. Your small gesture is a tribute to the man who gave us so much joy while carrying burdens we never imagined. There's a detail Tom Hanks rarely mentions in interviews, a faint tremor in his left hand that began when he was just 8 years old, the result of a childhood accident that left invisible scars far deeper than any physical wound. Long before the world would know him as America's most trusted actor, he was just a frightened boy in Concord, California, learning that stability was something other children had, but never him. Tom was born on July 9, 1956 in Concord, California, to parents whose marriage was already fracturing beneath the weight of incompatibility and exhaustion. His father, Amos Mefford Hanks, worked as an itinerant cook, moving from restaurant to kitchen, always chasing the next paycheck. His mother, Janet Marilyn Frager, was a hospital worker who carried her own demons that would eventually tear their family apart before Tom had even learned to tie his shoes. By the time he was 5, his parents' marriage had dissolved completely. But this wasn't a clean break with scheduled visitations and stable homes. This was chaos. Tom and his siblings were split like property. He and his older siblings, Sandra and Larry, went with their father, while his younger brother Jim stayed with their mother. Over the next decade, Tom would live in 10 different houses, attend 5 different schools, and watch his father marry 3 different women. I always felt like a passenger in someone else's life, he would later confess in a rare moment of vulnerability. Never quite sure where I belonged or if I belonged anywhere at all. The constant upheaval left wounds that makeup and fame could never quite cover. At 8 years old, during yet another move, Tom fell from a temporary staircase in an unfinished house, injuring his hand and developing a neurological tremor that would resurface throughout his life during moments of extreme stress. The doctors said it would heal. It never fully did. That tremor became his secret companion, hidden beneath steady performances, controlled through sheer will, but always there, a reminder of a childhood spent falling with no one to catch him. His father, though present, was emotionally distant, a man who provided food and shelter but little warmth. My dad was the kind of man who showed love by keeping the lights on, Tom reflected decades later. He did his best, but his best was survival, not affection. Each new stepmother brought new rules, new dynamics, new reasons to retreat into himself. Books became his escape, drama class his sanctuary. While other kids had stable friend groups and birthday parties, Tom had cardboard boxes and goodbye waves from windows of moving trucks. Looking back, he would say, that instability never truly disappeared. It only learned to hide beneath success, beneath laughter, beneath the characters I played. The boy who never had a permanent home would become the man who made millions feel at home in theaters worldwide. But first, he had to survive the loneliness. At 19, Tom Hanks stood at the crossroads that would define everything: stay in college pursuing a theater degree that promised nothing, or drop out and gamble his entire future on an internship that paid less than minimum wage. In 1976, he made the decision that terrified his father and confused his friends. He left California State University, Sacramento, walking away from the safety net of education to accept an unpaid position at the Great Lakes Theater Festival in Cleveland. There was no plan B, he would later admit, echoing the mantra of every artist who's bet everything on an impossible dream. Either I became an actor or I became nothing. Those first years in Cleveland were brutal. Tom slept on other actors' couches, survived on peanut butter sandwiches and tap water, and took any role offered, from carrying spears in Shakespeare productions to playing corpses that required him to lie still for entire acts. He earned $65 a week when he was lucky, nothing when he wasn't. The glamour of Hollywood seemed not just distant, but fictional. In 1978, his first professional review came from a local critic who described his performance as forgettable at best, distracting at worst. The words cut deep, but Tom kept them, folded in his wallet like a battle scar. By 1979, he'd moved to New York City with nothing but $800 in savings and a girlfriend, actress Susan Dillingham, who believed in him when no one else did. They lived in a Hell's Kitchen apartment where the radiator clanged like thunder and cockroaches outnumbered dreams. His first film role came in 1980, a glorified extra part in He Knows You're Alone that paid $800 total. The film grossed barely $5 million and vanished from theaters in 3 weeks, taking Tom's hopes of discovery with it. I was invisible, he recalled. Not just unknown, invisible, like I didn't exist in the same dimension as real actors. Rejection became his daily bread. Casting directors dismissed him as too ordinary, not leading man material, forgettable. One particularly cruel audition ended with a director telling him, "You're the kind of guy women want as a friend, not a lover. That's not what sells tickets." Tom left that audition and sat in Central Park for 3 hours, seriously considering whether his father had been right. Maybe he should have stayed in school, learned a trade, accepted ordinary. But fate works in mysterious ways. Director George Zaloom saw something others missed and cast Tom in a low-budget comedy called Mazes and Monsters in 1982. It was a TV movie about the dangers of role-playing games, critically panned and culturally irrelevant. Yet someone important was watching. Ron Howard caught 10 minutes of Tom's performance and saw what dozens of casting directors had missed: authenticity that couldn't be taught. Then came the call that changed everything. Howard was directing a comedy called Splash and wanted Tom for the lead role. It wasn't just an opportunity, it was resurrection from invisibility. The role of Alan Bauer in Splash wasn't supposed to go to Tom Hanks. John Travolta was the first choice, then Michael Keaton, followed by Robin Williams, established stars who could guarantee box office returns. Tom was nobody's first choice, barely even their last resort. But when scheduling conflicts eliminated the A-listers, Ron Howard took a gamble on the unknown actor who'd caught his attention in that forgettable TV movie. Tom had exactly 1 week to prepare for a role that would either launch his career or confirm his invisibility forever. The competition was fierce. Bill Murray's younger brother Brian was testing, along with a dozen other hungry actors who saw this Disney film as their golden ticket. Behind the scenes, Tom was falling apart. He'd developed severe anxiety that manifested in physical symptoms: insomnia, rapid weight loss, and that childhood tremor returning to his left hand. To hide it during filming, he learned to keep his left hand in his pocket or holding props. The famous underwater swimming scenes with Daryl Hannah nearly killed his career before it began. Tom couldn't swim properly and had concealed this fact during auditions. He spent 18-hour days in a Manhattan YMCA pool, training until his eyes were bloodshot and his muscles screamed. "I was drowning on dry land and underwater," he later confessed, "but I'd rather have actually drowned than admit I couldn't do it." The physical preparation was torturous. The production demanded he lose 15 pounds to appear more vulnerable, more boyish. Tom survived on 900 calories a day, running 5 miles each morning before dawn, then shooting for 14 hours straight. Between takes, he'd disappear to the bathroom, not for rest, but to practice his lines obsessively, terrified that one fumbled word would expose him as the imposter he believed himself to be. Co-star Daryl Hannah later revealed, "Tom was so nervous his hands shook between every take. He'd apologize constantly, convinced he was ruining everything." When Splash hit theaters in March 1984, even Tom's most optimistic prayers couldn't have predicted what happened next. The film exploded, earning $69.8 million domestically against an $11 million budget, becoming the 10th highest-grossing film of 1984. Critics who'd never heard Tom's name suddenly couldn't stop writing it. Roger Ebert called him a revelation, while The Hollywood Reporter declared, "A star is born, and his name is Tom Hanks." Overnight, Tom Hanks became the name on every casting director's lips, the same ones who dismissed him as too ordinary just months before. But even at this pinnacle moment, darkness crept in. The success felt surreal, disconnected, like it was happening to someone else. "I had everything I dreamed of," Tom reflected years later, "except the ability to believe I deserved it." The tremor in his hand grew worse. The insomnia became chronic. He'd achieved the impossible, transformation from nobody to somebody. But the boy who'd grown up in 10 different houses still didn't know where home was. The world saw Alan Bauer, the lovable romantic lead. But Tom saw an imposter waiting to be exposed, success balanced on a foundation that felt like sand. By 1994, Tom Hanks wasn't just a movie star. He was Hollywood royalty, commanding $20 million per film and standing at the apex of an industry that had once rejected him as forgettable. That year alone, he dominated global cinema with Forrest Gump, a film that earned $678 million worldwide and delivered him his second consecutive Academy Award for Best Actor, a feat only Spencer Tracy had achieved before him. His net worth had exploded to $150 million, with properties in Los Angeles, New York, and Idaho. He worked with titans Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis, Meg Ryan, Denzel Washington, artists who now sought him out rather than the other way around. The boy who'd once slept on couches in Cleveland was now the most bankable star in Hollywood, with his films generating over $4.9 billion globally. But even at the height of this impossible success, Tom was fighting a silent war with his own body. During the filming of Philadelphia in 1993, where he lost 35 pounds to portray an AIDS patient, something inside him broke. The extreme weight loss triggered a metabolic crisis that doctors would only fully understand years later. Between takes, he'd experience dizzy spells so severe he'd have to grip walls to stay upright. His vision would blur without warning. Excessive thirst plagued him constantly. "I had everything except control over my own body," he would later reveal in a moment of startling honesty. "I was playing a dying man while feeling like I was dying myself." The public saw triumph after triumph. Apollo 13 in 1995, another $355 million success. Toy Story, establishing him as the voice of childhood wonder. Saving Private Ryan in 1998, cementing his place in cinema history. But privately, Tom was exhausting himself maintaining the illusion of invincibility. He'd arrive on sets at 4 a.m. to receive vitamin B12 injections just to have enough energy for filming. His hands trembled so badly during the D-Day sequence of Saving Private Ryan that Spielberg thought it was method acting. It wasn't. It was his body screaming for rest it would never receive. Working with contemporaries like Robin Williams, Julia Roberts, and Antonio Banderas, Tom became known as the most professional actor in Hollywood. Never late, never complained, never showed weakness. What they didn't know was that he'd often lock himself in his trailer between scenes, lying in complete darkness to combat crushing headaches that felt like lightning in his skull. The insurance policies on his films had secret medical clauses. Studio executives knew something was wrong, but kept silent. Tom Hanks was too valuable to be human. "Fame is a demanding mistress," Tom once told a close friend during this period. "She gives you everything you thought you wanted, then takes everything you actually need." By 1999, at the absolute peak of his powers, Tom Hanks had 6 Oscar nominations, 2 wins, and the adoration of millions. But he also had a secret that would soon explode into public view. His body was failing him in ways that all the Academy Awards in the world couldn't fix. But even at the height of everything, the storm clouds were gathering. Tom's first marriage to actress Samantha Lewis in 1978 had begun with the desperate passion of 2 struggling actors who thought love could survive on dreams alone. He was 21, she was 26, and they were both nobodies in a city that devoured nobodies for breakfast. Within a year, they had a son, Colin, born into a 1-bedroom apartment where the crib doubled as a dining table. By 1982, their daughter Elizabeth arrived, but by then the marriage was already suffocating beneath the weight of Tom's sudden success and Samantha's stalling career. "I thought I'd found my anchor," Tom would later reflect with visible pain. "But we were both drowning people trying to save each other." The marriage crumbled in 1987, dissolving not in explosive fights, but in the silent acceptance that love wasn't enough when 2 people were growing in opposite directions. Samantha wanted stability, normalcy, a husband who came home at regular hours. Tom was being pulled into a world of 14-hour shooting days and press tours that lasted months. The divorce left Tom with crushing guilt, another broken home, another set of children shuffled between parents, exactly what he'd sworn he'd never create. "I became my father," he admitted years later, providing everything except presence. Then came Rita Wilson, the woman who would redefine everything Tom thought he knew about love and partnership. They met on the set of Bosom Buddies in 1981 when Tom was still married, but their connection didn't turn romantic until 1985, after his separation. Rita was everything his first marriage wasn't. She understood the industry, shared his ambitions, and most importantly, saw through the facade to the frightened boy still carrying that childhood tremor. They married on April 30th, 1988, in a ceremony that cost $1.2 million, with Steven Spielberg as best man and a guest list that included Hollywood's elite. Their son Chester was born in 1990, followed by Truman in 1995. From the outside, they were Hollywood's golden couple, two successful actors who'd found lasting love in an industry that devoured relationships. But behind closed doors, they were navigating struggles the public never saw. Rita's career had taken a backseat to Tom's meteoric rise, breeding a quiet resentment that would surface during long nights when Tom was on location for months. Love in Hollywood means loving someone who belongs more to the world than to you, Rita once confided to a friend. The real test came during Tom's endless shooting schedules. He'd be gone for 6 months filming Cast Away in Fiji, return for 2 weeks, then disappear again for The Terminal. Rita was essentially a single mother with a famous husband's bank account, but not his presence. There were nights she'd put the children to bed alone, again, while Tom was on another continent becoming everyone else's hero. "I thought I'd found my home," Tom said in a rare moment of vulnerability. "But sometimes home felt like just another hotel room I was passing through." Yet through every separation, every missed birthday, every premiere attended alone, they held on, not perfectly, but persistently, choosing each other even when choosing to leave might have been easier. In October 2013, Tom Hanks sat on the couch of The Late Show with David Letterman and delivered news that shattered America's image of their invincible leading man with 3 simple words: "I have diabetes." Type 2 diabetes, the disease that had been silently attacking his body for over 20 years, hiding behind the very roles that made him famous. The diagnosis hadn't come suddenly. It had crept through his bloodstream like a patient predator, announced through symptoms he'd dismissed as the price of success. The crushing fatigue during Cast Away, the blurred vision on Captain Phillips, the unquenchable thirst that had him drinking 15 bottles of water a day on set. The exact moment of realization had come during a routine insurance physical for Captain Phillips, when his blood sugar measured 750 milligrams per deciliter, 7 times the normal level. The doctor's face went white. "You should be in a coma," she told him. "I don't understand how you're standing." Tom's hands shook as he absorbed the verdict. His pancreas was failing. His body could no longer process insulin properly, and every extreme weight transformation for his art, gaining 50 pounds for A League of Their Own, losing 35 for Philadelphia, dropping 50 for Cast Away, had been slowly destroying his metabolic system. "I thought I was invincible," he later admitted. "Turns out I was just dying in slow motion with excellent medical insurance." The physical symptoms were merciless. Neuropathy sent lightning bolts of pain through his feet, making 12-hour shooting days feel like walking on broken glass. His vision would blur without warning, forcing him to have 3 pairs of glasses at different prescriptions on every set. The tremor in his left hand, that childhood companion, now had a partner, uncontrollable shaking from blood sugar crashes that he had to hide by keeping his hands in his pockets or gripping props until his knuckles went white. Between takes on Sully, he'd inject insulin in his trailer, the needle a constant reminder that his body had betrayed him. Rita became his guardian angel and prison warden simultaneously. She monitored every meal, carried glucose tablets in her purse, and learned to recognize the subtle signs of a blood sugar crash before Tom did. The slight glaze in his eyes, the momentary confusion mid-sentence. "I thought about dying every single day," Tom confessed in a moment of raw honesty. "Not wanting to die, but wondering if this disease would take me before I could see my grandchildren." The man who'd played heroes was now fighting a villain he couldn't see, couldn't defeat, only manage. Recovery wasn't possible. Management was the only option. Tom's daily routine became a medical regimen: blood sugar checks 6 times a day, insulin injections, a diet stripped of everything he loved, exercise that felt like punishment for crimes his younger self had committed. The permanent effects were undeniable: partial vision loss in his left eye, nerve damage in his feet that made walking painful, and the constant exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. "Diabetes doesn't care that you're Tom Hanks," he said. "It just takes a little more of you every day until you learn to live with less." The call came at 3:47 a.m. on March 12, 2002, while Tom was in the middle of filming The Terminal at JFK Airport. His assistant knocked on his trailer door with a face that said everything before words could. Samantha Lewis, his first wife, the mother of his oldest children, was gone. Bone cancer had taken her at just 49 years old, but Tom knew the truth was more complicated. It had been a 2-year battle that she'd hidden from the public and minimized even to him. "She didn't want pity," he would later say, his voice breaking. "She just wanted to disappear quietly, the way she'd lived after our divorce." Tom had known about the diagnosis since 2000, when Samantha finally told him during what was supposed to be a routine discussion about Colin's career. She mentioned it casually, like she was talking about a cold, not the cancer that had already metastasized to her lungs and liver. The doctors had given her 6 months. She survived 2 years through sheer will, determined to see Colin's first major film role and Elizabeth's college graduation. Tom had quietly paid for experimental treatments in Switzerland, flew in specialists from MD Anderson, converted his guest house into a space where she could stay during chemo. But money couldn't buy time, and time was all she'd wanted. The funeral was private, just family and a few friends who remembered Samantha before she became Tom Hanks's ex-wife. Tom delivered the eulogy, his hands shaking not from diabetes, but from grief that felt like drowning on dry land. "She gave me my first 2 children," he said, struggling through tears. "She taught me that love isn't about holding on, but knowing when to let go." Colin and Elizabeth stood beside him, orphaned from their mother, while their father belonged to the entire world. The guilt crushed Tom. He'd been filming, always filming, while Samantha faced chemo alone, while she vomited through nights with no one to hold her hair back. What the public never knew was how her death shattered Tom's carefully constructed world of second chances and happy endings. He'd believed that success could fix the past, that providing financial support could heal the wounds of absence. But standing at her graveside, watching his children lower their mother into the ground, he realized some breaks can never be repaired. "I thought I'd made peace with our divorce," he confessed to Rita that night, "but she died still feeling abandoned, and I'll carry that until I join her." The aftermath was brutal. Colin struggled with survivor's guilt, wondering if his success had come at the cost of time with his dying mother. Elizabeth withdrew, barely speaking for months. Tom threw himself into work: The Lady Killers, The Polar Express, using characters to escape the father who'd failed to save the mother of his children. But at night, when the camera stopped rolling, he'd sit in his car and sob, grieving not just Samantha, but the family they'd never managed to be. Her death changed him fundamentally. The man who played optimists in Heroes now knew that sometimes love means showing up too late, that some wounds time doesn't heal. It just teaches you to walk with a limp. By 2011, Tom Hanks sat atop a fortune worth $350 million, owned 7 properties across 3 continents, and commanded $25 million per film, plus back-end profits that could double that figure. But what the world didn't know was that his production company, Playtone, was hemorrhaging money at a rate that threatened to destroy everything he'd built. The company had invested $65 million in a series of projects that collapsed spectacularly. Lucky Guy on Broadway lost $12 million. The HBO series Big Love drained $30 million in development costs before Tom pulled out. And Larry Crown, which Tom directed and starred in, became his most humiliating failure, earning just $36 million against a $30 million budget and killing his directing career in one brutal stroke. The critics were merciless. Larry Crown was called Vanity Project Gone Wrong, proof that even Tom Hanks can fail. And most crushingly, the moment America's Dad became irrelevant. The film's failure wasn't just financial, it was existential. For the first time in decades, Tom Hanks was box office poison. Studios that had once begged for his involvement stopped returning calls. Disney quietly canceled a 3-picture deal worth $75 million. Warner Brothers reconsidered their commitment to his Robert Langdon franchise. "I went from being essential to optional overnight," Tom admitted in a private moment. "One film, and suddenly I was yesterday's news." Behind the scenes, the financial losses were staggering. Playtone's debt reached $45 million. Tom was forced to sell his beloved compound in the Pacific Palisades for $18 million, significantly below the $26 million he'd invested in it. His vintage car collection, including a 1974 FJ40 Land Cruiser and 3 pristine Airstream trailers, went to auction. The private jet was returned to the leasing company. The man who'd once traveled like royalty was now flying commercial, hoping no one would recognize the failure in first class. "I lost $75 million in 18 months, he would later confess. "Not from gambling or excess, but from believing my name still meant something it didn't." The public humiliation cut deepest. Paparazzi captured him at business meetings with bankruptcy attorneys. The Hollywood Reporter ran a devastating piece titled "The Decline of Tom Hanks" that dissected every financial misstep. Former partners distanced themselves. Ron Howard, who'd given him his breakthrough, politely declined to work with him on 3 consecutive projects. Steven Spielberg, his closest collaborator, stopped returning personal calls for 6 months. The abandonment was surgical. Everyone loved Tom Hanks the legend, but nobody wanted to be associated with Tom Hanks the liability. "Success has 1,000 fathers," Tom observed bitterly. "Failure is an orphan, even when your name is above the title." The survival tactics were desperate. Tom took voiceover work for commercials in Japan that he'd once considered beneath him. He accepted supporting roles in ensemble pieces, no longer the star, but part of the furniture. He sold his share in several restaurants, liquidated his art collection including a Norman Rockwell painting worth $8 million. Slowly, painfully, he began to rebuild, not the empire, but something smaller, more sustainable. "Rock bottom isn't dramatic," he reflected. "It's sitting in your accountant's office, realizing that everything you thought was permanent was actually just borrowed time." Today, at 69, Tom Hanks lives not as the invincible hero America once believed him to be, but as a man who has learned that survival itself is the greatest performance of all. From the frightened boy shuffling between 10 different homes to the icon who made the entire world believe in hope, his journey reminds us that our heroes are human first, legends second, and that perhaps their greatest gift isn't their strength, but their willingness to keep standing despite their wounds. He rises each morning in his modest Pacific Palisades home, the mansion long gone, replaced by something smaller but warmer, checking his blood sugar before the sun comes up, injecting insulin with hands that still carry that childhood tremor. His daily routine is a negotiation with a body that no longer obeys. 45 minutes of gentle swimming to manage the nerve pain, medications lined up like soldiers on the kitchen counter, reading scripts with magnifying glasses because his vision continues to fade. His net worth has stabilized around $180 million, comfortable but no longer astronomical. Recent projects like A Man Called Otto and Asteroid City earned modest returns, reminding Hollywood that Tom Hanks can still deliver, just not miracles. What brings him joy now are the small victories invisible to cameras. Sunday dinners with Colin and Elizabeth, who have forgiven the absent father for trying his best with broken tools. Video calls with Rita from different cities, their marriage now a testament to endurance rather than passion, but somehow stronger for surviving its own earthquakes. Watching his son Truman direct his first film, seeing in him the hunger that once drove a young Tom to drop out of college for an impossible dream. He finds peace in his workshop, restoring vintage typewriters, machines that, like him, still function, despite being considered obsolete. The universal message woven through Tom's story speaks to anyone who has smiled through pain, who has been everyone else's strength while crumbling inside, who has discovered that success doesn't protect you from suffering, it just gives you a more comfortable place to fall apart. His journey tells us that our worth isn't measured in our invincibility, but in our willingness to be vulnerable, that our real legacy isn't the characters we play, but the courage we show when the cameras stop rolling. To those watching who are fighting their own invisible battles, the chronic illness you hide from coworkers, the grief you carry in silence, the fear that your best days are behind you, Tom's story is your story too. You are not alone in feeling like you're performing wellness while privately wrestling with collapse. Your struggle is valid, your pain is real, and your survival is heroic, even if no one applauds it. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us which of Tom's performances carried you through your own dark moments. Leave a like, not just for the actor, but for the human being who showed us that even America's dad needs grace. Subscribe to hear more stories of icons who remind us that behind every legend is someone just trying to make it through another day. Thank you, Tom, for the laughter through our tears, for showing us that broken people can still build beautiful things, and for proving that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're not okay and keep living anyway.